feature film based on the Feral House book Lords of Chaos about the black metal scene in Norway in the early 90s. Lords of Chaos will be filmed late this year in Scandinavia and is directed by Jonas Åkerlund.
Close enough.
Adam also wrote the screenplay for the upcoming feature film Dallas in Wonderland about the strange stories behind the cover-up of the JFK assassination, filmed in February. Adam's presentation tonight concerns the book Ritual America, Secret Brotherhoods and Their Influence on American Society, a book he co-wrote with Craig Heimwichner. The more than 400 images within largely come from Adam's own collection that he's put together for the past 15 years. I want to welcome you, Adam Parfrey.
Hi, really cool to be here. Hello?
Hello.
This is the book in question. If you can't see the side view up there like that, so I'm going to show you that now. Here's the back view. This book came as a result of a singular fascination of mine that started at the age of 10 in Washington, D.C. My grandfather took me to D.C. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing these goggles. They call them hoodwinks. These are used for initiation process. And people are, initiates are led to different areas where they're shown ways of where the rituals are revealed to them. And at the end, the biggest revelation comes. I was initiated into the International Order of the Odd Fellows in Waxahachie, Texas. And I don't think it's revealing too much to say that the last thing, when they lifted up these blinders, was that I saw a corpse in a coffin. And basically that's to tell you, when you join the order, the important thing is, first order is sex, but the second order is death. And if you think sex and death, that's the Masonic or Oddfellow, or all the various orders, ritual, the primary elements of what you learn in the ritual of those matters. So anyway, I'll go back to where I first got interested in this subject. With my grandpa, I was like maybe 10 or 11. My grandfather took me to D.C., showed me all the sites there, took me to the Smithsonian. But beyond that, we were in a Howard Johnson's hotel across from this complex they called the Watergate complex. At that time, all that tomfoolery was going on there with the Watergate complex, and they were caught around that same time. But at that same moment, a strange thing happened. There was a parade of black Shriners there on the avenue right ahead, right in front of the Watergate complex and right in front of the Howard Johnson's hotel. And these magnificently attired black men came in with the fezzes and their uniforms and all that. And it struck me like, what is this all about? And I tried talking to one of them about that, and of course it was a kind of a I was just this kid, and we were going to explain that. But then it created a fascination of what is going on with these groups. Why are they doing what they're doing? Why do they dress up like that? Why do they feel the urge to march? What's going on here? And so as years went on, I would pick up this ephemera or books and other things about this, but never really do you get the essence of that scene. There were books written that were in this kind of flowery and impenetrable language written for insiders. And then there were people who were more conspiratorial, trying to tell you that it's all about space aliens of a reptilian nature that were going to take over the world and so on. And what was it? So anyway, I started to get involved with this project. I've collected over the years so many images and photos I found fascinating, but what's most fascinating is what is not in the books. Usually they're like scrapbooks of personal photos, or magazines at the time, or newspapers that were specifically attributed to Masonic groups, and so on. So you get also, I think the most interesting book I ever found was one on how to run a Masonic Lodge meeting, because it has very specific information on what these groups are trying to put across to the members of these things. And it's not the usual thing you would find on that, but we'll get around to this. I'll go through this slideshow and show you what's going on. There's a book there. And then we'll start from the beginning of the United States, because what fascinated me particularly was the influence of Masonry and all the affiliated groups or offshoot groups of Masonic type organizations on the American culture, on the structure of the family, on entertainment, of insurance, of every possible thing. Politics is big in that, even the structure of buildings, the architecture of buildings. It's to contemplate how much influence these ritual and kind of occult, quasi-occult groups had on the structure and the meaning of America is remarkable. This photo, or this image, is of Ben Franklin. He might be in front of a French Fraternal Lodge, a Grand Orient Lodge. Of course, when he went over there and the French gotten hooked up with Ben Franklin, they were our allies in the war against the British. In a sense, the British and France have been warring, and what's strange about all this is that the British, the French, and the Americans, they're all fraternal brothers. But what does that mean? If they're brothers, why are they warring against one another? What I discovered, you can't really find that. Try looking that up on the internet and find out why. You can't get a straight answer about that at all. What I could just determine was that the British Masonry was a very insular, very closed off type of Freemasonry, very class-oriented. And the French terms of the Grand Orient, it was still class-oriented, still internal, but it was a more open and a more Americanized concept, more open-ended democratic style thing. And so that was the biggest conflict between the French and the British forms of Freemasonry. There's George Washington, our first president, on our dollar bill with all that Masonic type, the Great Seal on the back of the dollar bill with George on the front. Okay, do you know what the big G means that's there in the wall? Geometry? Yeah, that's a definition. Any others?
Great architect.
Grand architect of the universe? Yes, that's another.
Grange.
What's that?
Grange.
Great?
Grange.
Grange. Maybe, but not usual. But the thing is, what we discovered is that what it really means, the secret or twilight meaning of it, is I'm just losing it now. But it's the generative properties. I'm sorry. The generative, it's a sex sign to people, you know, or higher levels of Masonry understand that idea. The big G means reproduction, and there it is. So you see the big G. It doesn't mean G-spot necessarily, but it means generative power. This fellow, they're making a statue of here. His name is Albert Pike. He was a general for the Confederacy. What's interesting about this particular model or structure or whatever you call it, statue, was being made for a Washington, D.C. Element. So he is revered by both North and South, although he ran this Southern Confederate style ritual group called the Scottish Rite Freemasonry that was based in Charleston, South Carolina. And what's interesting about Albert Pike is that that was a group that already existed, the Scottish Rite Freemasonry. And it's linked perhaps to the Scottish pirates who were going against the Catholic Church and having their, money stuff that they were, what was it? In any case, they were against the Catholic Church in a great way. And of course, the Scottish Rite Freemasonry is joined by Protestants, and so is the York Rite Freemasonry. It's a Protestant organization. Catholics were frozen out of that, both voluntarily and, the Freemasons said, oh, Catholics can join us, but it really wasn't for Catholics. Freemasons were a Protestant organization in the big Protestant versus Catholic fight. They were at war, really. And so what's also interesting here about Albert Pike, and he changed the whole rituals of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, but it's interesting what he brought into the rituals of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. And that is, there was a writer, Eliphas Levi. People who know Aleister Crowley would know of Eliphas Levi, because Eliphas Levi's research on the history of the occult was very influential on Aleister Crowley, who again was another Freemason, and he was involved with the Scottish Rite Freemasonry and other forms of Freemasonry that were thought of as not being right or given credit by the bosses up at York Rite or Scottish Rite as being a real form of Freemasonry. All these little battles about what is the right type of thing. Are you the proper mode of being a Freemason? That is so important to these people. Not important to me because I'm totally outside that world. But it's unusual how these people get mixed up in just the most minor and intimate of details on what a ritual means and what it is. And if you look it up, they'll say, Aleister Crowley is not part of Freemasonry at all, because they consider themselves the only real Freemasonry, right? But he went through the same rituals.